Greetings and welcome to the Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. I'm Phyllis Hollis, your host. As an extension of my Instagram page, Cerebral Women, this podcast offers insights into the visual art world. I interview artists, mainly artists of color and female artists who will freely articulate what inspires their creativity. In addition, you'll hear interesting perspectives from dedicated art professionals who work with artists and the art institutions that feature them. I'm confident that collectively, these individuals will indeed stimulate your mind as they do our eyes. Please know these interviews are conducted in my Manhattan apartment, so please forgive the background sounds of city life. Welcome to the Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. In this episode, I feature artist Nicole Awai. She was born in Trinidad, educated in the United States, and she works in many media, including painting, photography, drawing, installations, ceramics, and sculpture, as well as found objects. Nicole received her BA and MFA in Multimedia Art from the University of South Florida and has been an artist in residence at numerous places, including the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture, the Studio Museum in Harlem, the John Michael Kohler Center, and Hunter College. She has exhibited widely in the United States as well as internationally at such institutions as PS1 MOMA, the Brooklyn Museum, the Salvador Dali Museum, the Queens Museum, the Biennale of the Caribbean in Aruba, and the Busan Biennale in South Korea, to name a few. Nicole was awarded the Joan Mitchell Painter and Sculpture Grant and an Arts Matters Grant. Nicole was a critic at the Yale School of Art in the Department of Painting and Printmaking from 2009 to 2015. She is currently faculty in the Department of Art and Art History at the University of Texas at Austin. Her bio is quite impressive, and I regret providing only a glimpse into her many accomplishments. With that, I'm delighted to feature Nicole Awai on my Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. Enjoy. Nicole, thank you so much for joining me today on my Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. So let's open up with you telling us about yourself, and at what point in your life did you discover your artistic passion?
I'm originally from Trinidad, and I've been living in the States most of my adult life. And according to my mom, she said that I have been doing this since I was 3 years old. So it's interesting when people ask about, when did I discover my passion? I always knew that I was an artist. So actually, I think the question became, what else would I do? You know what I mean? And I think especially as Caribbean, West Indian woman, that actually became an interesting question. And sort of like maybe you don't accept that art is a thing to do in a certain way. But it was always there for me. I actually thought about architecture for a hot second. But no, it's art.
It's great. It's great. It's great to be able to follow your passion, especially one that you had as a child. So what motivates you to create your work? It's a compulsion. It's so interesting when other artists, students, people, talk about, they can't find their motivation. I never think about it in that way. It's this compulsion. There are times when that compulsion is really strong, and I think it's triggered by things that we are just experiencing in the world and about us. I think it's an awareness that I always have. If I'm not physically making it with my hands, I'm making it in my head. I'm crafting the concepts behind it. I'm playing with the language behind it. I'm looking at words and how those definitions are expanding.
and how that wants to manifest itself into materiality. I don't know. It's always there. I don't understand how people have a hard time with the motivation. I always thought that was sort of odd.
So, how does your work connect itself? Does one body of work influence the next?
Yes, it's really just a continuum. The more that I do this, is the more that I realize that, especially when, something that you experience or some artifact or something that you've had for 20 years, all of a sudden, becomes relevant, and something that oh my goodness, now I know how to use that, or now I know what to do with that. So even though, you can look at things and, parse them out as bodies of work, you realize it's just really a continuum, and it keeps going. It really does. I've been in this moment, of course, because that I haven't been able to make as much, physically, but, really reprocessing and looking at the work that I've made in the last few years, and how everything is really more interconnected than I knew. And I was really reprocessing and looking at my show that I had late last year, called Envisioning the Liquid Land, and really seeing how maybe 2 or 3 bodies of work kind of came together, culminated into that body of work. So I think that's what I've been, really doing, examining how even the history of my work is possibly going to propel it in the future.
And your work, abstract, but I see figures in it from time to time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really think as artists, we kind of shift back and forth, and in between all these modalities, So I really, my mind doesn't stop and think abstraction and representation. It really doesn't. Actually, in a sense, it's all sort of abstract for me. I think the way, depending on the body of work, the things that are recognizable are actually tools to sort of pull the viewer in, or a tool to sort of refer to the familiar, to put them in a place of openness. But many times my figures actually act as sort of abstractions in themselves, conceptual abstractions in themselves, more than they are sort of representations. So that, for instance, in my drawing series, Specimens from Local Ephemera, I was often using this double-sided figure that actually initially kind of came from the Topsy-Turvy doll, which for me was something that was really unfamiliar. It was something that a friend gave to me in the early 2000s that I had never seen before. And I had started working on that body of work called Specimens from Local Ephemera. And that was, the series was about this parallel world, social, political, cultural, from our world, sort of formed physical amalgams of things. So when my friend, gave this doll to me, I was just like, oh my God, it's something from Local Ephemera, like for real, So in a sense, it really became this abstraction. It really became the place of like physical manifestation of tropes, it was an antebellum period topsy-turvy doll where there was plantation mistress on one side and, mammy on the other. And of course, you flip the skirt and one thing is revealed and one thing is concealed. Mm-hmm. And that's always been sort of themes in my work too. What is revealed and what is concealed? What is what is on the surface and what is underlying, it was just like, oh my good God, and strange enough, it's not something that I came across even in my younger life in the Caribbean. Since then I've heard from friends from other islands that there are forms of that. Of course, not the same tropes, but I had never seen one from Trinidad. It was just, it was crazy. So I think when I was using that double-sided figure, it really became so symbolic of so many social tropes. I mean, I think I initially used it in a way where it did refer to that whole antebellum kind of history and that period. And that slowly morphed into more of a representation of contemporary feminism, and then morphed into this abstraction that, was just about sort of the idea of embodiment, but then embodiment of many ideas, if that makes sense.
It does. I sometimes struggle with understanding abstract art, and the figurative is always easier for me. But I notice the figures are it's very subtle. But I really appreciate your work. So when you are creating work, do you think about your audience?
Yes, I do. Because it's all about connection. Why are we making art if it's not about connection? I think an artist is somebody who wants to share, who wants to connect. If not, you could just make this in your apartment, whatever it is, lock yourself away and don't show it to anybody. But I think as artists, we want to share it. We want to show it. So I don't understand when people are not aware of audience. For me, I'm aware that, people bring their histories to what they're seeing, and I feel like those histories are going to activate for them the art experience. Because I feel like this art is something that connects us all. Mm-hmm. Art is something that hooks us into our humanity. I have been in amazement since I was a child that something made by somebody, on the other side of the world, I could look at it and feel this connection, this sort of human connection and human experience. And it's in all art. It's in literature. It's in music, right? And it's in visual art, and it doesn't, it's sort of this, I call it this empathetic recognition where, we can connect on this human level, regardless of our backgrounds and our situations. And there's something in our history that we could bring to something that reveals that for us. So, I think being aware of audience is important.
Mm-hmm. So the current movement that we're experiencing, the protests, I don't want to call it a revolution, but it feels like it. How do you feel that connects artists? How do you feel that it will impact your work? Trick question.
Well, I think in a sense, it's not something that can be ignored. It's, in my case, as I said, I think all of those things are underlying and always have been there to a certain degree for those who are open to accessing that. I'm not a political artist, and I'm not, throwing about slogans, etc. But I think all those concerns are probably have always been there in my work. And in the last 2 years, people asking me to do sort of these related projects to those issues. I mean, I think it's coming from the people who are understanding and can see that was always there in my work. I think I'm in this moment of being wary of artists being given prescriptions, especially artists of color. We are operating underneath enough of that nonsense as it is. Mm-hmm. We can, that's a whole other show you can have about, what artists of color get accepted, what kind of work, what kind of, because especially think for artists of color, if your work does not fall in the box neatly, then it's either difficult or it's not commercially viable or whatever, mountains of nonsense. And I think, and I actually think my work has always existed in the in-between spaces. It doesn't fit neatly into the boxes. But I think it's outside of the box that the innovation happens. So it's a space and a place that I gladly own as an artist.
So with that, do you feel that there is a specific definition that defines artists? I mean, visual artists are all different, so you can't put anyone or a specific type of artist in a box. So the definition of an artist, is it accurate?
Oh, that's always tricky. But an artist, that's always tricky. It's, that goes into that saying, I know it when I see it. Right. That's a hard one to sort of pin down, but that's the thing that I'm talking about, this always wanting to pin us down to categories, and especially artists of color. We're supposed to make work that looks like this or does this or reinforces that, and I think being an artist is resisting those things. I think, I think if we fall into that, then we start to stifle art, and art's not going to move forward. It's in the in-between that the art moves forward and advances. Mm-hmm. That's just how it is. And that's the wonderful thing about it.
And with that, do you think the critics understand your work?
It's an interesting. I think some have. I think some have not. I think, those who have are probably more exceptional, but and those who have not, oftentimes they're kind of stuck in those boxes themselves. I have, last 25 years, I've been able to see, the thinking around art, contemporary art that has, come from the Caribbean, or people, who are from that region, see that it's starting to expand, at least the way some of that work is considered. But, initially there's that resistance. I found the expectation of what we're supposed to be making, or wanting to compare what we're making to other folks of color in a very fixed way, or to not, or to really honor what they're doing and not what, folks from that region or related to that region are doing, as if they can't really have a contemporary expression, as if they can't really have sort of a expression that talks about modernity, their contemporaneous life, that it has to always be processed through something else. There's a thought that, no, you're just copying everything American, or you're just parroting everything European, or there's not this understanding that these folks actually have an experience of the world that is not just vital, but is essential as well, and has always been contributing to art and to humanity on the whole.
So early in your career, can you recall if there were any particular artists, a body of work, a sculpture that influenced you?
Growing up in Trinidad, I think visually so much of that culture was an influence. And I think it's why I've always thought of myself, no, I don't resist when people call my work painting or sculpture, but I've always thought of myself as somebody beyond that, in a sense. So this idea of being multimedia, I think, comes from that cultural experience, that place, in a way. I mean, and it has its good and bad in that, artistic creativity is more fluid. It doesn't really have a high and a low, it doesn't have this hierarchy that it sort of exists here. And, that also could be problematic at times because, it's not honoring, there's so much creativity there that's not honoring of that as something as a pursuit at times. So, very much that culture, and the things around me there were, of course, an initial influence. But, growing up, I was also looking at old masters' works, as we all do, fascinated, flipping through books. I think something that made an impression on me early on is that, starting to understand that, what was the difference between a print that I was looking at as opposed to a painting. And I remember a moment of realizing, no, those are different processes. And I was really curious about that. When I came to the States, I really, I think you look for the kindred souls, the people who, you have these ideas, and you're looking for the people who have similar ideas or in the ballpark of those ideas. So for me, it was Robert Rauschenberg right off the bat, because talk about understanding that, sort of a transcendent sort of language. Linda Bengler's, Jessica Stockholm talk about 3D painting, and it's like, yes, oh my God, yes. All these people who are starting to articulate, these things that were the ways that I was seeing things. So yeah, it's always been those people, I feel like, who saw art in a more expansive way, that did not see things so separate. For me, I still think I come from painting, and that painting is that contiguous language that could move and is not medium specific. It's the language. So yes, it was artists who saw that and understood that, or at least I recognized that in what they were doing.
Slightly different question. What's your opinion on this focus on removing some of the monuments?
As I said, it's funny. It wasn't anything that I was thinking of specifically, but, as I said, some of these questions came to me as projects and things that people were asking me to comment on. Maybe it was a moment of looking at those things in sort of the historical totality, like stopping to do that. And it's a tricky thing. I think I never was trying to give a specific condemnation or acceptance of these things. I think I'm more concerned with, why this is problematic right now. It's because we've come to a head with the erasure of history. And that really, to me, is what is important about what is going on now, recognizing, right, that there's so much history that has been erased, hidden, sidelined, and that has been very consciously done. And I think with the removal of monuments, that conversation is happening and needed to happen, whether they are removed or they stay. And there's lots of ideas, good and not so good, around how that should be done. But I think it's so important that we are recognizing that there are these gaps in our history, or that there are these untruths in the history, and that if those things are being examined and illuminated now, that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. That's a good thing.
And would you agree that the artists play a substantial role in bringing these things to light?
That's another question that has been plaguing me. It's funny. I was thinking the other day, if you look at us as artists and the essential function we play for humanity, maybe we are essential workers, but, we're only essential workers in the sense of, that we do have the ability when pressed and forced. Because, as I say, once again, I'm against sort of people, categories, positions, functions for artists. It's not a good thing. But when we are pressed, we're able to sometimes create something visually or otherwise that, that really is transcendent, or is really becomes a place inside of reflection. These are things that we can do. But I don't think that these are things that have to be forced on us. I think artists will naturally respond. I don't think anything that's prescribed or forced is going to create good art. And I'm a little concerned with, especially younger artists, the way they're thinking about activism and how that marries with their artwork. That actually, in some cases, is not really marrying very well. And that their activism is important, but their activism is not necessarily art.
Interesting. This has been delightful, very thought-provoking. So final question. What impact do you want to have as an artist? What would you like your legacy to be?
I just want to make art that does what great art has always done to me. Just fascinating. There's those artworks we go visit them in the museum, wherever, and to me it seems like, maybe it's every 5 years that I see a particular artwork. And every time I see it, I swear I see something else. I swear it's gotten even better. I swear it's touching my soul in a different way. It almost seems like the artwork is evolving with us. And I think there's something in that where I actually do believe that it is evolving. And our consideration of it is evolving as well. And that, that goes so beyond even what the artist initially had thought of and planned of. And I find myself as an artist in those moments too. It's like, no, this thing has grown beyond me.
Wow.
I just want to make work that's like that. The work that makes you just, as an artist, think, oh my God, this is amazing. I hate you, but it's because, of course, I'm so jealous that this is so fabulous, but I love it. And this is all. If I could make one thing, this has always been what I said to myself, even as a very young artist, if I could make one thing that's like that for people, oh my God, it would have been so worth it.
That's a great goal to have.
I live in hope.
Well, I've viewed your work and I've looked at it over and over again, and I make sure I look at it for the years to come. But your work is thought-provoking.
Thank you.
But
I hope it grows with you.
Yes. Yeah, no, I just look and stare, It's complex, your work. So I enjoy it very much. And I've enjoyed our conversation. And I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Take care. Thank you for listening to Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. For additional content, please visit cerebralwomen.com and be sure to follow Cerebral Women on Instagram.